Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about my Shield Charge Ignite Elementalist. After the Shield skill changes this league, and a lot of people looking at Spectral Shield Throw and the newly introduced Shield Crush, I was actually looking at a different buffed skill, Shield Charge. While being considered a movement skill only by most people, after the changes it actually packs quite a punch with crazy amounts of flat physical damage in one big hit, making it a prime candidate for bleed and ignite builds. The reason I went with Ignite was the potential to combo Shaper of Flames with all the available physical damage added as an element or even added as chaos damage to get another huge multiplier on top of the existing ones. We actually get both Proliferation and Explosion in this build by combining Fan the Flames and the Ascendancy's Gentle Touch unique gloves. Fan the Flames allows us to have global proliferation instead of the targeted one from the Ignite Prolif support, meaning that our explosions can proliferate ignites as well. The explosion from Ascendancy's Gentle Touch are huge to proliferate since its base is physical damage, making it scale all the physical damage added as extra that we already have in the build for Shield Charge, making for some absolutely ridiculous proliferation chains. We also use the Bronze Life unique body armor to get to the level 23 breakpoint for Shield Charge, giving it an extra spike in damage, while supplementing Shield Charge's clear speed with both attack and movement speed, making this kind of a perfect fit for the build. Overall, this build has been stupidly fun and reminds me of the old Shield Charge cast on crit discharge builds, charging into a pack and exploding the whole screen. And while this is definitely not a bosser, the map clear has been absolutely incredible. With that being said, let's get into the build portion of the video. Alright, so before we get into the items and the gem setup and whatnot, one of your first questions might probably be, why Shield Charge? What is special about Shield Charge? And why would you want to go Ignite with it? Now, just quickly to point out, everything I did for this build, I did live on stream on twitch.tv/Palsteron. So if you want to see kind of me min-maxing my builds, or if you just want to see the builds live in action, if you want to ask me questions or just want to hang out, hit me up there. But yeah, let's continue with the video. So this build kind of was created out of something of a nostalgia of myself, which was old cast on crit Shield Charge, which is basically just you Shield Charge around, you hit an enemy and you discharge and everything explodes and you just move and move and you never stand still to cast anything. You just move and have an absolute clear speed monster. Well, with the buffs to Shield Charge in this patch, I thought that Ignite Prolif will actually be the best way to kind of replicate that feeling, and let me explain to you why. So Shield Charge is very unique for Ignite builds in the way that it has a lot of base physical damage and not fire damage or any other combination of damage. And that is very notable for one reason, and that is scaling your physical damage with physical damage as extra something. Cold, fire, lightning, chaos, it doesn't matter, even Unholy Might goes, because you have the Shaper of Flames Ascendancy, which means that everything can ignite, even the physical damage. You don't even have to convert this physical damage from Shield Charge, but you can basically scale this base physical damage extremely well with all these sources, basically introducing a new multiplier to an Ignite build, which it really needs after all the nerfs it received this patch. I actually think this is one of the stronger ways to play Ignite this league. And yeah, let's go a little bit further into this. The Elementalist Ascendancy is actually very well made for Shield Charge because, number one, Mastermind of Discord wants you kind of to expose enemies, and exposure is actually pretty easy with Master Fire if you're always in the face of enemies, basically giving you this for free. Now, you don't want to get exposure on hit because that wouldn't really work unless you have 100% on hit, because you're not hitting a lot, you're just hitting once. So Master of Fire is just absolutely glorious with this. And on top of that, Heart of Destruction is the big winner of this build. It gives you 60% AoE, which doesn't only go for your Shield Charge, but also is global AoE, so it also scales your Ignite Proliferation. Now, talking about proliferation, you might ask yourself after looking at the intro, what the hell are these explosion chains? I don't understand. And why you're prolifing and exploding corpses at the same time? I thought that if you explode corpses, you can't prolif. Well, the thing is, this is a combo between Ascendancy's Gentle Touch and fan the flames, which is really, really interesting. Now, this has been done before, so I'm not going to claim anything on here. This was pointed out to me from a chatter of mine, Maddenator87, and he basically explained to me the interaction between Asenuff's explosions and fan the flames. So first up, if you think about what I had in here first, it was just Ignite Prolif, right? I thought, well, obviously you want Ignite Prolif in your links because that Ignite Prolif has more AoE. Like Wrapped in Flame, like Fan the Flames only has an AoE of 15. So why would you ever not just go for Ignite Prolif? Well, turns out the reason is Ignite Prolif only lets the skills that are supported to it prolif. But if you have something like Fan the Flames, which is global prolif, your explosions can proliferate as well. Now enter Asenuffs, which are physical damage, get scaled by all the physical damage as extra, and all of those are getting converted to Shaper of Flames, making this explosion be able to ignite. And this explosion is then going to proliferate that ignite further and further, and those are the explosions you're actually seeing in the video. And what will happen is, if you think about a horde of monsters, is all the insides are going to explode and prolif to the outsides, and the monsters at the outside are not going to get exploded, and those are still going to stay there as corpses, proliferating the ignite further and further. So what you have in the end there is just absolute carnage, and Herald of Ash is just the cherry on top to make it even a little bit more nice to look at with the Automaton MTX, of course, but also just give you a little bit more overkill damage, which you have quite a lot with the explosions, which can scale quite a bit. And as you saw in the preview, this build, because of that, is also insanely good for Blight maps and also Blights in maps. Now, one more thing I want to point out about this build is this is a mapping build. This is not an all-rounder. This is definitely not a bosser. I left some footage of a Minotaur in the intro, which wasn't all that glorious. I'm sure you saw it. And that is because this build is not made for bossing. You can do bosses. Map bosses are no problem whatsoever. But this is not made to be, I don't know, a dedicated bosser. It's not meant to be a character that can do anything. If you think about making a bosser, this would be the opposite of that. So this is to absolutely annihilate maps, basically. Now, what this does very well, though, is if you're farming Blights, for example, which is what I'm currently doing with it, which is Lyra Arthane, right? So if you're doing Lyra Arthane or Valdos Rest Blight farming, this is incredible for those. So I'm just going to point that out. But in general, this wants you to have very linear maps, but also open-ended are fine as well. The explosions that we added in the end really, really made this a lot better in open-ended maps and not only in strand-like maps. So yeah, I just want to point this out so you don't get the wrong feeling about this. If you're mostly bossing, this will not be the build for you. All right, let's talk about our Ascendancy, which is Elementalist. Now, this is very important to point out at the start. You really want to be Elementalist because just of this node, number one. Shaper of Flames, your hits always ignite, which is very, very nice. You don't need global ignite chance for your explosions to proliferate. You don't need to think about anything. You just have a 100% chance to ignite, basically. And all damage can ignite is the big selling point here, which means that all the added lightning, cold, and even chaos damage through stuff like Unholy Might or Elementalist extra chaos damage can all ignite. And it also means that you do not actually have to convert your shield charge. Don't get confused by these points here. These are just because they're actually good for damage. You don't need to convert anything in this build because also your physical damage from shield charge can ignite. You don't need to convert to fire. You don't need avatar fire. Nothing like that. Straight up, this point makes it extremely convenient to gear and kind of is the driving force of why physical scaling is so strong here. All of these physical as extra can be converted into actual ignite damage. Now, your next 4 points, which are also kind of no-brainers, are first up, Mastermind of Discord. Now, some of you guys might have the question of, does this actually work with Master of Fire? If you've played this game a lot, you know that PoE can be weird sometimes with wording. This actually works. So this actually does apply the fire exposure, even though it's like an aura effect around you. It does count as apply. Mark GGG actually did confirm it in a thread. So it does work with Mastermind of Discord, just to point that out, number one, because that's the first thing I was looking at, because it's kind of very convenient. And then you get Heart of Destruction, which is just huge. Against single targets, it gives you 30% more damage. while mapping, it gives you 60% AoE, which is global AoE, which counts for explosions, all the proliferation, and the initial hit of the shield charge. As the last 2 points, there's a few considerations here. I actually, in the end, didn't end up going for Barracks Respite. So we didn't go with the shock nodes. If you're running Barracks Respite, I'm pretty sure you always want to go with the shock nodes because you're also going to shock proliferate, which is huge. In the end, we end up going with some more defensive rings, kinda, with some more accuracy, because this build is very, very accuracy starved. So we ended up actually cutting this for Bastion of Elements. Now, if you're more on a budget, you might actually not be able to do this. You might just need the damage from shock. But since we have the luxury of doing it, we kind of went a little bit more defensive, and Bastion of Elements helps out a lot. Also, just being able to run LE Reflect maps is really, really cool, because Ignite builds have a lot of mods that they have to reroll, because they also have to reroll Avoid Elemental Ailments, which is super annoying. So just having -1 of these on a mapping character is really nice. But overall, in our build right now, this comes down to like a 3,000 shield against LE damage, which is just absolutely insane. So unless you really want to embrace the softcore life, I would probably prefer this. But if you're all in on damage, go for Shaper of Storms. All right, so let's get into the items here. Number 1 is the Scepter. This might look very, very intimidating for you. I can assure you that this is actually a lot easier to make than it looks like. With the help of Awakener Orbs, with the help of Ashling, and with the help of Fizz rerolls from Harvest, this is actually quite deterministically to make. The only annoying part to get is the gain 8% of elemental damage is extra chaos damage. Everything else you can make deterministically with 10 to 30x, depending on how good you want it to be. I will be following this up with a crafting guide, just putting that out there. If it's already out, I will link it down in the description as well. But basically, this is just the trigger socketed spell on use is just to trigger a Blade Vortex setup, which is used to combust enemies, which gives them -10 fire res, and on top a little bit of more crit on it. So we can proc, where is it? We can proc our LE Overload a little easier because our shield charge itself doesn't have that much crit, and it doesn't hit that often. So this is really, really nice. And also to actually trigger our Tailwind from our boots. Now, other than that, just as much physical as extra, elementalist extra as you can get, and then a fire dot multi-craft at the end. Now, next up, we have our shield of choice, and that is Bronze Life. This might seem a little bit sketchy, but I'll tell you why. So the only reason we have the implicits, just to point that out, there's nothing fancy going on with the implicits here. It's just to get a little bit more damage. The reason I got these is because nobody wants Bronze Life, so these are extremely cheap to get, which is why I have the implicits, but you don't need them. What you need is just the Bronze Light gives you +2 to level of socketed movement skill gems, and the thing is, shield charge has certain breakpoints where it increases its damage per 15 armor or evasion, which are the big breakpoints, which is where you get the big damage increases. Just a flat damage, base offhand fizz damage is cute, right? The extra levels are okay, but the second line with 4 to 6 added fizz damage per 15 armor, if you can increase that to 5 to 7, that's huge. And you don't need any increase here. So if we put that in here, for example, as you can see, this is 5 to 7 added physical damage per 15 armor, up from 4 to 6, which comes around to like 13 to 14% more damage, which is huge. So you don't need these corruptions. Or better said, you will get corruptions because they're so easy to get, but you can also get percentage increased damage, which is about as good as these levels, actually. You can get percentage life, you can get +1 max all res, whatever you want. You can get no corruption at all if you're on a budget and you want to make it easier to color. Also totally viable. I just want to point that out, that Bronze Life is about the +2. Now, obviously, if you don't have a 21, then you need more than +2, but I think it's cheaper to get 21 than getting a expensive corruption here. And other than that, the chest just has everything this build wants. So shield charge scales off of attack speed and movement speed. Not equally, I would say, but it's kind of in tandem to be faster. And this has 10% attack speed, then 15% attack speed if you used a movement skill recently, so basically 25% attack speed in total, and then also 10% movement speed, increased damage with movement skills. It just has everything we want. absolutely premium for this kind of build, and it is going to be quite hard to get the damage back from somewhere else if you go for a more defensive chest. So I just want to point that out. I think that it is a no-brainer for this build to go for this chest and then actually search for defenses elsewhere. After that, we have some really spicy boots. Now, as always with boots, all you want is movement speed, tailwind, attack and cast speed while you have onslaught, cannot be frozen if you can. Maybe some life would be nice as well. That would definitely be GG here. Maybe you get Ashling movement speed with cannot be chilled. That would be premium. That would be better than the 35% movement speed here, actually. But yeah, this is not that big of a deal. As always, get as good of boots as you can. Movement speed obviously scales very well. Something I will say is don't go for elusive. The problem is 10% chance for crit. We have very low crit chance, so while we can maintain tailwind, maintaining 10% chance for elusive is extremely hard, so I wouldn't really go for it. It is not that important. Skip that one. But yeah, just go for as much movement speed as you can. Next up, very important, the shield. So these shields are getting crafted quite a bit right now. Getting 3000 armor and shield will be expensive, but there is a lot out there. And you can basically figure out the suffixes that you want yourself. For me, for example, I wanted to get Herald of Ash in the build, but I will say that Herald of Ash is more of a cosmetic thing. It doesn't actually do that much. I tried it with and without, and the explosions are usually enough. Herald of Ash is more of an overkill, so you don't really need the Socketed Gems have reduced reservation to get the Hatred in, but you do need it to get the Herald of Ash in. But what I will say is that 3000 armor alone is already really, really good. These cost quite a bit. You can also go for like 2.8k armor. But do note that this will scale your shield charge damage quite a bit. So this should be one of the places where you invest a little bit more into the build. Now, after shield, we also have amulet. Now, the amulet slot is really, really important. Like I said, I will talk about this in my crafting guide. These are not that hard to make. You want physical as extra cold, lightning, fire, whatever you can get. And then in the suffix, if you want to go really GG, you would want fire.multi, which I didn't get here. I hit a very, very nice T1 res with some decks, and then I still had a place to craft. So I thought, okay, I'm going to stop here. But you can also go for fire.multi, which is going to be another 10% more damage. But we were going to talk all about that in the crafting video. Now, the gloves are basically as enough. You should really be running these. I actually did the build before we introduced the explosions because I didn't realize it functioned like that with the Fan the Flames, the global Prolif, basically. I didn't realize it, and once I tried it out, it was like, okay, I'm never going back. This is an absolute no-brainer. As for corruptions, there's not that much. The duration gems doesn't really do anything. It's just about getting some more life. So don't think really about the corruptions. Just get any as enough gentle touch. They're going to enhance this build to another realm. As for the helmet, I just want to point out that Blizzard Crown is not really important. It looks like a lot of damage, but this build has a ton of flat physical damage from shield charge, a ton. And that physical damage is way more premium because it scales all our physical as extra, which the cold damage does not. So this flat cold damage is really not that important. It's like basically this implicit with cold damage is as effective as like this node or something. So it's like if you have to pay 8x for this base, just don't. It's not worth. I will point that out. Now, we need the Hatred reservation if we want to go exactly with this setup. If you want to cut Herald of Ash, then you also don't need the Socketed Gems have reduced reservation, and you're good to go. But other than that, we just went with minus fire res. Nearby enemies take increased elemental damage. I will talk about this in the crafting video as well, where we go over the rares. And yeah, this one was very unlucky. We actually crafted this one on stream, which is unfortunate, but I just left it as is. I didn't want to go deeper into it. But yeah, so this is the helmet we have to stick with. And at the end, let's talk about the rings, because this is a little bit of an interesting one. Now, the ring slot is extremely interesting for most Ignite builds. I just want to go over some of the unique choices and why I ended up with two rare ones. Number one, Replica Emberwake is absolute trash. This ring has been used in way too many Ignite builds for the last few leagues. And I'm just going to point this out because a lot of people don't seem to realize how bad it is to reduce your Ignite duration to that extent. Now, if you have kind of a build that always applies Ignite all the time, sure, it's okay-ish, but with the 90% reduced ignite duration on enemies, you will actually go down to like a second or something. That is a ton of not only damage reduction, but also it means that the corpses that are on the ground that would prolif, which usually would absorb stragglers, like stragglers would just run into these corpses and die, the duration is over like this. So while it might look good in POB, in reality, this plays out really, really badly. So I would never, ever recommend Replica Emberwake in this build. I would shy away from it at any cost. So let's just put that out of the way. Number two, which are actually viable options, are Barracks and Emberwake. For example, also in tandem with each other, because the Barracks Respite is different from Prolif, so it will actually put an additional ignite whenever an enemy dies. So with Emberwake, you get 2 ignites, one from the Prolif and one from the Barracks, which is pretty cool. Overall, the reason I didn't go with this in the end is just stats. Now, on rare rings, you can get resistances, accuracy, which is extremely hard to get, especially since our glove slot is unique, and our helmet slot, it will be really, really hard to get the accuracy you want. So rings are kind of the no-brainers here to get that. We are already running precision on top, so it is just really, really premium to get the accuracy. On top of that, flat life, we're running a bronze, so we will have to get those defenses somewhere else. Otherwise, we're gonna be at like 4k life or whatever. Like with everything on, we're at like 5.5k life. So yeah, also minus mana cost, super premium, very, very nice to play. We're already running a eternal mana flask of efficiency with enduring to kind of get our mana cost going. It is kind of clunky, and it also means you can reserve more mana without it feeling bad. And yeah, just overall life, resistances, accuracy, these fill out all the things we want. Now you can also try this setup out. You will be way more squishy. If you don't care about that, that's fine. In the end, I haven't really felt the difference enough to where I thought it was worth it over just rare rings. And as for build at the end, obviously if you have Headhunter, this is a zooming, mapping build, so Headhunter is absolute best in slot, but if you can't get that, Daedian Dawn is actually incredible. This is a ton of damage through the faster ignites, but not only that, it also has life and resistances, so basically anything you would want from a belt. Put the attack modifier, I think abrasive catalyst they're called, so the ignite faster goes from 35 to 42%, really, really nice to have. This is a huge damage increase, and Daedian Dawn in general is just really, really nice. You can also go Torrent's Reclamation if you just want to be faster, but for the showcase and the intro and whatnot, I went with Daedian Dawn to have a little bit more of a balanced approach. All right, so as for flasks, the most important flask here is the Enduring Mana Flask of Efficiency. If you can do it without the efficiency suffix, you can get something else, like more attack speed, for example. But this is just really, really premium and basically solves all of your mana problems like that. So instead of slotting in like jewel sockets, like Replica Conquers Efficiency or something, and reducing your damage, reducing your survivability, I would just, honestly, just this one-stop fix of Enduring Eternal Mana Flask of Efficiency, you're done. You can forget about mana issues. The only thing you have to remember actually is that there is a sextant that will give you instant mana recovery. So with that, enduring doesn't work. So just reroll that sextant whenever you get. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very annoying. Just pointing that out there because it happened to me a few times. Really, really good flask. Will fix all your mana. We have a life flask of staunching. I went for bubbling. Now you can try out different things here. But the thing is, you need a life flask because you don't really have good sustain, and that is definitely one of the weaknesses of this build. We went for some more regen on the tree, as you will have seen, just to kind of counteract the blood rage that we're running, which smoothens out the build quite a bit. But we do need a life flask in this build, and then we also have a Quicksilver of Adrenaline, just more movement speed. We also have the used when charges reach full, just so if you forget to press it, it's always there. And then you have the Taste of Hate and the Sins Rebirth down here, which are both for damage. Unholy Might is a huge damage increase since the chaos damage can also ignite. It also gives us some anti-ignite, which is not that important, but it's cute to have. Smoke clouds are also not bad, but do remember that our Asenuffs will probably blind enemies anyways, so it's mostly for the damage increase. And then Taste of Hate is just one of the best Flasks in the game after it changes. It didn't really get touched all that much. It's damage, it's survivability, it's everything you would want in a Flask. Now, as for our main setup, shield charge number 1, we have 5 awakened gems here. Don't get intimidated by this. The only awakened gem that actually costs something is LE damage with attacks. Everything else, these are like 10C each. It's actually very, very, I don't know, sad that they changed awakened gems the way they did, but it's still the best and it costs you almost nothing, so why not? We go with Deadly Ailments, Swift Affliction, Unbound Ailments, LE damage with attacks, and burning damage. Most of these are kind of no-brainers. I will just go over these two real quick. Swift Affliction and Unbound Ailments kind of cancel each other out in terms of duration, kind of still having a good chunk of duration for your Prolifs to stay on the ground and keep igniting enemies, which is pretty cool. And one thing I want to point out for POB, if you're looking at POB and you think, oh, Deadly Ailments is actually not as good as he makes it out to be, it actually is, because the damage of the shield charge gets multiplied by your attack speed in the POB. So it makes it look like the hit damage is actually better than it is because we're igniting. And the hits are not prolifing. It's only the dot that is prolifing. So only look at the ignite DPS, not at the total DPS when looking at Deadly Ailments. Deadly Ailments is still definitely worth it. Then we have our first aura setup. Now, I have this because I have the Socketed Gems have reduced reservation. I have this in here, which is Hatred, Malevolence, and Enlighten in the Colossal Tower Shield. So if you have this mod, put them in there. But other than that, we have some Precision. Now, Precision on 21, we actually wouldn't even need it on 21 because we have 2 accuracy rings. This could be on like 13 or something and it would still be fine. So play around with your mana reservation a little bit, see what fits in. If you can't fit in the Herald of Ash, it's mostly cosmetic. It's really just nice effect and a little bit rounds out the overkill damage. You can also go for Herald of Purity. It will be more single target damage. And on top of that, just because it fit in here, is Flame Dash, because obviously shield charge doesn't go over like hurdles or like, I don't know, like cliffs, I guess. So just having Flame Dash in there as a round, like a round out on my Q is really nice. And then I have the Blade Vortex setup with Ink Crit and Combustion in my Scepter. This is because trigger a Socketed spell on using a skill with a 4-second cooldown, which is no problem because that's the duration of Blade Vortex. So Blade Vortex is always up and combusts enemies it comes into contact with. And then also you have the increased critical strikes, which is, as I already pointed out, really nice to give you a little bit more uptime on the LE overload and on your tailwind from your boots. Then we have a pretty cute setup here with Vengeance and Enhance. Now you might ask yourself why. What is going on here? See, we actually want to have Fortify in this build, but the problem is putting it in our main links is very rough because it doesn't have that much damage. So we would have to replace like Unbound Ailments or something, which is kind of rough because we want to kind of even out the Swift Affliction a little bit. So what we're doing is we're triggering Fortify with Vengeance plus Enhance. Just so you know, even though we have a Scepter, we're not just triggering Overlord for no, like just while shield charging. It doesn't work because shield charge hits with the shield. So what we do instead is we have a trigger setup with Vengeance and Enhance. All Enhance does is basically just increase the chance to trigger to like 53%. So it's not that big of a deal, but we just have it in here because it's more consistent, right? And so whenever we get hit, we have a 53% chance to trigger the Vengeance, and the Vengeance then hits with the Scepter, and that will trigger the Overload. So that's how we get Fortify on this build. Then we also have Blood Rage. This is also linked to Enhance, so we get a little bit more attack speed. And we have Steel Skin, which is on our left click to give us a little bit more survivability. At the end, we're rounding this out with a Val Haste setup with increased duration. Val Haste is actually incredibly cool. So usually I have my movement skill on mouse 5, but since our movement skill this time around is also our clear skill, I have that on right click. And on mouse 5, I have the Val Haste, which I press whenever it's up. And this basically gives you a real Headhunter feeling. So you get a ton of movement speed, a ton of attack speed, which both scale the speed of shield charge. Absolutely premium with increased duration, and it also gets scaled by the Malevolence. So it has like a 6-second uptime, which is actually very nice. And then at the end, we just have a Cast on Death Portal setup in here because stuff can get rough, but you can play around with this. If you have a more tankier version, you can definitely go without it. It kind of fit in, so why not? Now, in the end, it's time for the passive tree. Now, basically you have to start through these really bad nodes. They don't scale shield charge at all. And then I went for the mana life here. It makes precision a lot easier to sustain for your mana reservation. And then I went for anatomical knowledge here. Now this is just a budgety choice. If you want a really good corrupted blood jewel, you will probably be paying 10x plus, which I wasn't really willing to do at this time. So this is kind of a easy fix for like an X or whatever. It also gives you a ton of life with all the int around here. So you want to have some sort of corrupted blood jewel. Otherwise, you will have a miserable time, as with every build basically. LE overload, pretty mandatory. Now, agility, I just have that in here while I'm not running Headhunter. Usually I'm running Headhunter, so Dex is not a problem. Now we have 2 cluster jewels, so let's talk about that real quick. I already talked about Overlord. This is basically triggered by Vengeance because shield charge itself doesn't trigger it because it hits with the shield and not with the scepter. So if you don't want that setup and you don't really care about Fortify, or you want to run Fortify in your main links and lose a little bit of damage, then forget about this one here. Go for another elemental cluster with Sadist and stuff. But we just went with this, and then we also have Martial Prowess. This gives us some attack speed, some damage with ailments from attacks, which scales our damage, and also accuracy, which is really, really premium in here. And then in the cluster jewels, there's basically 2 notables that are mandatory. Number 1 is Master of Fire. This basically makes it so that enemies around you have fire exposure, which then scales our Mastermind of Discord here, giving them a huge minus to their resistances. Now, you might ask yourself why I'm not running Elemental Equilibrium, and the answer is pretty simple. It's because this is a mapping build. Now, you could have kind of a setup where you go for Stormbrand, because Stormbrand can still ignite while not doing fire damage, so you could go and reduce enemy resistances with that stuff, and you could maybe even put it in the weapon here and have some nice POB damage, but in reality, Stormbrand only triggering every 4 seconds, it doesn't really do that much for mapping. I'm not gonna lie. It's fine for bosses, but it can also be a downside while mapping where you're actually not gonna hit enemies. They will get plus 25 res, and most of your scenarios will be just mapping. So why make it hard for you with Elemental Equilibrium? In my opinion, I've actually tried this out. It is not worth it. Now, other than that, the second absolutely required one is Fan the Flames. Now, this is the one I was talking about. Ignites your inflict spread to other enemies within a radius of 15. This is global, so it also works for your explosions, while Ignite Prolif in your links would only work for the skill that is linked to it. Other than that, you fill these out with whatever you want. Cooked Alive, even after the nerf, is still good. Obviously, Fire Mediums got kind of butchered. You don't even have to go for Fire Mediums now. Cooked Alive is still fine. Wasting Affliction is really, really good. As you can see here, I have another Cooked Alive, another Cooked Alive, and another Cooked Alive for 4 in total, because I really like minus res, because if you have a map with plus res, it can get pretty dicey. I also have 1 Flow of Life just to get a little bit more tanky. The regen also helps with the Blood Rage degen, so kind of a nice way to round out. If you want more tankiness, you can actually go for 4 Flow of Lives. That will really increase your survivability, because regen kind of is mandatory for this, for Blood Rage not to feel bad, because we're not really leeching or getting any life gain on Ignite or anything like that. Sovereignty and these nodes here, you will just have to figure it out yourself. Everybody will have different items, so we'll have different mana reservation, but most likely you will need this to fit in Hatred, which is really important. And then here I have a Lethal Pride setup. Now, these are actually pretty easy to get. If you don't know, like, people are farming 5 ways and then selling a ton of Lethal Prides at once. So what you can do, for example, is buy all of them. The passive, so the notable doesn't matter, so you can buy any of the ones. You can buy Rakiata, you can buy Kaom, whatever it is, doesn't matter. You could just buy all of them and just try them out if you find a good combination, and then just resell them again. Don't waste any divines. This is way, way, way cheaper. So probably do that. And what I got in the end was I settled on one that had ignites you, inflict, deal damage 10% faster, ×2, and then also one with 20% increased burning damage. The other notables are pretty weak. This is like 5% strength, which doesn't really do anything. And then I have some okay ones here, but not really doing too much overall. So it's basically just 20% faster ignite and 20% burning damage, which is still overall worth it. You also get quite a bit of strength on all of these nodes, which gives you a lot more flat life. So overall, just really, really nice. Try this out for yourself. But yeah, if you have like good nodes here, for example, if you had like faster ignite here, you would take this node. If you had something good here, you would also take this node or whatever. Now, the AoE nodes, obviously area damage does not scale or ignite, but we kind of want some more AoE. Now, we already get 60% from here, but getting to 90% is kind of a great increase. I actually tried it out with both. And also one thing that can happen to you is that sometimes you gain convergence when you're actually in like clearing mode. For example, if you hit like a Beyond boss, and then your 60% AoE is gone. And at that point, having 0% AoE versus having 30% AoE, at least from this, makes a huge difference. Our second cluster, our second large cluster, is Sadist and Prismatic Heart. The second node isn't that important, but definitely go for Sadist. This is straight up 60% increased LE damage, always up, since we're hitting with all elements. Other than that, this is just a really, really good damage cluster. Don't really think about the conversion, but something I will say is, you will want to check your POB if your fire hit is actually the biggest one, because we're not really converting, right? So we have a lot of physical damage there from the shield charge that doesn't really get converted. So these nodes are kind of important for the conversion still, just so you can have the biggest hit of your ignite being fire, so you can get 25% more damage. Look at in your POB and just make sure that it is there. So this cluster is kind of a no-brainer just for that. Then we just go for some more life. We go for some more attack speed, life, and whatnot. Our jewels are basically looking like this. This would be premium. This is burning damage over time. Multiplier, then either global fizz damage or fire damage. They're basically exactly the same. And then you want maximum life to get yourself a little bit more tanky. Also, if you have to get more accuracy, you can also get versatility here. And yeah, that's basically it. But that's it for the video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, subscribe. You can also catch me live on twitch.tv/Palsteron. I'm live 6 out of 7 times a week, so pretty good chance that you're gonna see me there. And yeah, this build was an absolute blast. The crafting guide will be coming soon, probably tomorrow or the day after. If you're watching this in the future, obviously just look in the comments or in the description. The link will be there if you're interested in actually making these items. But yeah, this is an extremely good map clear build. I haven't really seen anything similar in terms of speed. It definitely is not a boss killer. This is not made for single target. So once again, I want to point that out. But I hope you liked the build guide. And since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.